would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to Monday, November 14th, 2016. Hope y'all had a great weekend. If you'd like to reach out, head on over to therebelbroker.com. From there, you can send a message along to me with any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions you might have. If you prefer, you can email me directly at therebelbroker.com. You can also take a couple of minutes out and enter yourself for a chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card at the site. All you got to do is click the big red button at the tippy top of the page, titled Take This Survey to Support the Show. Use the same email address both times you're asked during that process and answer the 4 or 5 questions to sort of get some demographic information about the type of folks who listen to the show, and you are all done. You've not only helped the show out, but you've entered yourself for the possibility of winning that $50 gift card. We've already handed out 2, one at the beginning of October, another one at the beginning of this month, and we're going to hand out another one in December. So you'll be in the drawing for that. So head on over to do that to get your chance at that $50 gift card. And of course, if you'd like to join the Rebel Underground, just text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. That's text the number Rebel Broker, all one word, to the number 44222. I promise this isn't one of those deals where I sell your email address. This is something I keep strictly confidential. You'll only hear from me, and you won't even hear from me that frequently unless there's good info to provide. You'll get access to free content, advance notice on different things. So it's a great little group to join in on. And again, to do that, just text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. I had a lot of different things that I was potentially going to talk about today. I think as we move through the end of 2016, I think there's a few things that I'd like to talk about. You know, I'd actually prefer that some of you thought about some things before we had this chat. As you know, I've mentioned this before, and last year, if you joined in this time last year, we spent some quality time. We spent quite a few shows talking about goals, goal setting, how to prepare, what the very first step should be. I mean, I can't even remember how many days. It feels like it was almost a week worth of shows about goal setting and getting into some very specific, starting with general so that you could apply those techniques to whatever your goals might be, whether they're involved in real estate or not, and then getting much more specific, whether or not what kind of investor you wanted to become in real estate, that type of thing. And I like to do a review every quarter to figure out if I'm on track. Some folks don't. Some folks want to do a year, and that's fine. So I would suggest that be the maximum you wait. I mean, you should never wait more than a year. And the new year is a time that most people kick off the what am I going to set for my goals for the following year type of thing. So I'd love for you all, as we enter into the end of the year, spend a little time reflecting. Where are you now on your goals? If you weren't part of the show a year ago and you didn't spend any time sort of arranging for your goals, figuring out how you wanted to see yourself or what you wanted to achieve 1 year from today, I'd love for you to take the time to do that now. But before you do that, try to learn from the year that's about to end. Look back over the last year, and maybe you didn't have formal goals. Maybe you didn't create lists. Maybe you didn't create items on your calendar that were going to commit you to certain tasks that would help move your goal achievement forward. But whatever you did, try to think back to what in your head you were thinking you wanted to, at the end of 2016, look back and say, I accomplished that. And try to figure out what helped, what hurt, what were the things that held you back. However, and this is why I'm kind of making this a little bit of a homework item, I want you to focus on the things that you could affect. 99.9% of the time, you don't achieve goals because of something you did or didn't do. It's got very little to do with other people. And if you're finding yourself most of the time blaming other people for you not achieving certain goals, then I think that's an indication to you. You need to seriously take a look at what you are or are not doing. If you're kind of in that mode where your first reaction is to blame someone else or some external force, you need to step away from that. Whether it is true or not, it's not helpful. It's not gonna pave the way for you to achieve goals in the future. You need to think instead, how could I have managed my interaction with that person who I believe held me back? How could I have managed that interaction differently so that I could have gotten results closer to what I wanted? What were the circumstances of the failures that you're blaming on others or blaming on other things? And how could you have managed those scenarios so that those failures didn't occur? What could you have done differently? Because the reality is, in the end, all you can really control is what you do. And again, the vast majority of the time, you're the one who needs to own the outcomes that you get come the end of a year or come the end of the time period when you've been shooting for certain goals. So think about that stuff. We're going to review it, and it's going to include some personal regrets I have that are a little bit more long-term over the last year. I had several things on my list. I have made it pretty far along on some of them, not so much on others. So I'll do a little self-analysis myself and share it here and try to figure out where I went wrong. And also, as we move later into this year and the beginning of next year, I think probably I'm going to put a little bit more of a shift on some actual, and we've already sort of done this. We've done this sporadically, but I'm coming across a lot more really good sources of information relating to investment related things in terms of managing your tenants and those sorts of things. And we've talked about that in general terms, but I want to provide a little bit more content in that area, just because I think that's a valuable thing, particularly when it comes to managing tenants, because I honestly believe that one of the biggest things that scares off new investors are bad experiences with tenants. And again, the bad tenant is not the tenant's fault. The bad tenant is your fault. So we need to come up. It's just like I say, it's the exact same theory that we've talked about before. You don't make your money when you sell a house, you make it when you buy it. It's that upfront work that you do that really solidifies whether or not this is going to be a good purchase for you. And just like in that world, whether you're a buyer who just wants to live in a house or an investor, that's true of either scenario. But for the investor, think of that acquisition of a tenant as just as critical as the prep work you put in to purchasing the property in the first place. And what I find as the common thread in most tenant horror stories is that the landlord did not do enough homework to vet that tenant. And if they had, they would have discovered that person was a chronic eviction person, or that they were using someone else's social security number or what have you. So it's absolutely something that's worth your time to do. There's plenty of online tools to do this, but the reason I bring this up is we're going to start talking in a little bit more detail about this stuff, just so that I'm making sure that you guys have the tools you need to jump in there and make it happen. Now, nothing I'm saying here is designed to make you fear taking a risk in real estate. In fact, quite the opposite. The point I'm trying to make is that everything that is a risk in real estate is a manageable risk to an extensive degree. There are tons and tons of ways, methods, tips, tricks that you can use to give yourself the highest probability of the outcome that you're looking for. Now, every once in a while, might those fail? Sure. But the rewards, I think, speak for themselves. And we'll get more into those as well as the year goes on and into next year. But I'd love for you all to sort of prepare yourselves and think about, where do I want to be a year from now? What are the things I want out of my life? And what part can real estate play in that? I had a interesting, I thought, perspective on this a year ago when I was setting my own goals. And I've reanalyzed it a little bit. And over the years, you've heard me discuss some of the things I've decided I'm going to do, which were changes in my overall goals. But I think that kind of reflection is nothing but healthy. So we'll jump into that a little bit as well. For today, though, I wanted to hit what Rismedia is saying we're in that time of year, right? This is when folks are trying to look over the horizon and tell us what to expect in 2017. So I thought I'd hit 4 trends that are going to reshape real estate in 2017 and see what we can expect and see if these seem like realistic expectations. I'm not 100% sold yet on some of these, and some of these we've already discussed that were mentioned by other big names in real estate. But we'll go over them together, see how we feel about them. Now, the first one on their list is probably the one that is worth the greatest amount of debate, and that is millennials rising from the basements. Now, remember, when we were having these chats about millennials as recently as July, and I seem to remember having discussions about this even in August and September, so not that long ago. It's only been 2-3 months when these folks were all telling us how all the surveys, all the various things that pointed to what millennials were and were not going to do, they're in a holding pattern. They aren't going anywhere. If they do go, they're going to wait and save up for the house that'll keep them satisfied for a decade or more. Very much a holding pattern for millennials, according to all these folks and according to their surveys that really aren't that old. New data is seeming to indicate that everybody is expecting a huge wave of millennials over the next 18 months. And I think even I'm being generous by saying 18 months, by giving them a bigger margin of error. They seem to be saying next year in terms of that wave. Now, what these folks are saying is, as millennials get older, they're increasing home ownership rates faster than in previous years. And that's according to research from Fannie Mae. Millennials have overtaken baby boomers as the largest generation in the United States, and many of them entered their post-college years during one of the toughest economic periods in decades. For years, we've heard the joke about the number of them living at home with their parents. For a while, this was true, but the economy has improved now, and with jobs seemingly more abundant, millennials are coming to the real estate market. Now, remember, one of the things I like to push here is understanding the idea that a lot of this news tends to be push news, meaning they're not looking at things and sort of trying to report what is. It seems to me when I read some of these reports, they're reporting with the hope that this creates the idea in the real world, and then it happens. Now, I've talked also about what's been going on here in my local marketplace in terms of jobs. And talking about the economy improving and jobs being more abundant isn't really reflected in the local numbers. We've seen actually very flat jobs numbers here in the Bay Area. And in terms of the types of jobs nationally, they have tended to not be full-time career-style jobs. We've seen mostly service industry jobs, and we've seen more folks taking on more than one job. Not a scenario that tends to lend itself to buying a house. This is difficult times for a lot of folks who are working an awful lot of hours, and whether or not they can then funnel that into potentially purchasing a property, I think is a debate worth having. I think there's a lot more data to collect on this before we can claim that millennials are about to make a huge jump into the market, because let's also look at the market they're faced with. And I don't see a lot of change in terms of what their potential attitude would be. We're still seeing huge inventory problems. The biggest increases we have seen, at least locally in my marketplace, have been giant increases in the number of apartments for rent. That doesn't spell lots of folks buying a house. If the average price of a home in Santa Clara County or in San Jose is over $1 million, it seems to me the folks who are faced with that are going to rent simply from a cash flow at the end of every month scenario. That would be what makes sense. And I also just don't see what 6 months difference can make in terms of these polls. Now, 6 months ago, millennials were saying something very different than what folks are saying that they're talking about now. Have all of these folks in 6 months managed to save up the down payment? Have they all suddenly gotten jobs? We just haven't seen enough of an increase in actual career related jobs for that to be reflected. It just doesn't make much sense. Now, while that's very much true for my local situation, I also haven't seen these numbers change much nationally. The national numbers I've looked at don't really reflect this. Now, this article goes on to say first-time buyers are a driving force for a healthy real estate market, and millennials are starting to buy homes. They're starting to age into a group primed for home ownership, and many of them are in better positions financially because of years of saving and living in, quote-unquote, the basement. This influx of new buyers and increased demand is likely to lead a strong 2017 market as they seek to take advantage of low interest rates. And that in and of itself may be self-defeating. Remember, more buyers equals higher prices. That increases demand. We're not seeing a huge increase in the number of homes for sale. We're seeing a big increase in the number of apartments for rent. So it becomes, again, a self-defeating scenario where prices jump ridiculously if this is true. So the odds of it being sustainable even, let's say there is a rush. Let's say suddenly millennials do come out of the woodwork. Well, only the first month or two would work as prices get negotiated up above asking price further and further because you've now suddenly got this big bulge of buyers out there trying to buy all these various properties. So we're going to have to wait and see how this goes. In terms of rating this as a reliable prediction, I would rate it pretty low. I'd probably only put it at maybe 30-40% chance of this actually happening. And even then, in that success rate, you'd probably have to also include the idea of them having some sort of short-term bulge in the market that would really just drive up prices and hose everybody. However, given what has happened to the real estate market in terms of credit reports and all those other types of things, these folks would be more able to potentially qualify for loans simply because the bar has been lowered. Whether we want to admit that or not, that is exactly what has happened. And again, it primes us for a ridiculous number of problems. And remember, millennials are also saddled with some things that we didn't have the last time around. And the entire debt of the folks involved, I think, is a big deal. If you average in the cost of their student loans and you average in the cost of auto loans is at a crazy level right now. And that's something else that I think that plays into this. The greater level of debt will make it even more difficult for these folks to qualify, except for some of these very aggressive, pushing more towards the subprime end of things style loans. And you mix that with artificially high prices because of excessive demand, and you see a very big change in the marketplace, and not for the better. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break before we move on to the other points made by this article. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're reviewing an article from Rismedia relating to expectations that they are putting out there for the year 2017. Always good to calibrate ourselves, I think, to what the big dogs in the industry are thinking are going to come our way. We just chatted a little bit about millennials rising from the basements. And, I think we should also point out that there were some outlets that were saying the same thing was going to happen later this year for some millennials. We had some very interesting contradictions. The majority of folks, including myself, were predicting that millennials were not going to come out last year or this year, and they didn't. My prediction would be that the odds of this happening are very low, as I already mentioned before the break. So I'd love to hear what you think. If there are folks out there in other markets that are really starting to see the millennials come out of the woodwork, because I'll tell you what, the other probability here is this won't be a secret, at least not to real estate agents that are active in the marketplace, because these folks will come out and start doing their searches long before they actually make their purchases. And the other thing is, I haven't seen any data from Realtor.com indicating an increased number of folks doing their searching, which is something I keep track of, or at least look for word that they're announcing it. And I'll tell you what, there would be absolutely zero wait time between an uptick in the number of people that are shopping on Realtor.com and when Realtor.com would tell us about it. So you can take that for what it's worth. Next, interest rates will rise, according to these folks. This question will push many people into a buying decision. The reality is that this has been the same question at the end of each of the last 3 years, but eventually they have to go up, right? Not necessarily. In fact, we may experience low rates for many years to come. That would be my guess. We'll continue to see low rates as 10-year treasuries continue to be relatively low. And we'd have to ask the question, at what point does that panic button get pushed? We've seen interest rates rise up to over 4%, and when they crossed the 4% range, didn't push the button. People didn't jump out. Would it be 5%? Would it be 6%? What percentage is it that's going to make people think I need to jump on board before it goes up any further? For a lot of these folks, there's no historical reference. There's no realization that for the vast majority of the last 40 years, interest rates were over 10%. They just don't grok that. They're so used to interest rates being so low. And I'm not sure what the reaction would be. The reaction might be, well, over the course of my entire adult life, I have never seen interest rates above 4.5%, 5%. If they were to hit 6 or 7%, what's their first instinct? Is it to jump in and buy at what in their personal lifetime is the highest it's ever been? Or is their instinct to say, I need to wait for interest rates to come back down again? I think that's an interesting question to ask. I know for someone like me who has been doing this thing, I've been alive as long as interest rates have made that huge fluctuation. I think the highest they ever were in my lifetime was somewhere around 18 or 19%. But I can remember when they crossed the line from over 10% to under 10%, and everyone completely went bonkers and suddenly wanted to buy because interest rates were so low compared to their experience. We'll have to see, though. As this article points out, I think that unless some other very critical economic thing occurs, I would also guess that interest rates are going to be maintained relatively low. As we've seen, the Fed absolutely wants to do what it can to keep interest rates low. They've been defending the stock market. The reason the stock market is so high is because interest rates have been kept low. As soon as we see that go up, interest rates, then we'll start to see a negative effect in the stock market for that. Next, to move or remodel, that is the question. With so many homeowners locked in at extremely low interest rates and many are choosing to remodel their existing homes instead of move. And I think that's a huge one for folks, particularly the folks older than the millennials, in terms of changing their home based on their needs instead of changing from one home to another that more closely meets their needs. The question many people are facing is whether or not they should spend the money remodeling or take advantage of their increased equity and buy their long-term dream home. Space and location are typically the deciding factors when considering a move. The biggest increase in prices has primarily taken place in starter homes or homes more easily financed for first-time or middle-income buyers. Higher-priced homes and luxury homes in many parts of the country have not experienced as large of an increase in prices. This gives many homeowners the increased financial leverage to purchase their dream home with a larger down payment, low rates, and a payment they are comfortable with. And this is also an interesting one to keep in mind. If you're someone who wants to jump into real estate and operate at the luxury level in your market, be very cautious about that. I'm finding that past a certain dollar point, for instance, here in Morgan Hill and San Martin, in the areas I like focusing on the most, we're seeing continuing to see the biggest hits in the luxury market. Once you get past about $1.3 million, things tend to slow up dramatically. Even some homes that we're selling for at the height, we're seeing some homes in the higher end, the higher luxury market, that still aren't at their highest point from 2006, 2007. So that's a very dicey marketplace. If you're looking to do that as a flip scenario, That's also a tougher option. My guess is, or my suggestion is, if you do want to do luxury, go up to where you can see that banding. And we've talked about banding before, where you look for a correlation between price ranges and activity in terms of days on market and how often they tend to get their asking price, that type of thing. It's pretty easy to figure that out if you look at data over, say, the last year, 2, 3 years, whatever you can get from your real estate professional. But really try to plot it out. And it is sometimes a moving target. I know that, for instance, the magic number a couple of years ago was 1.2 million, and now it seems to be a little higher at 1.3, just from the data that I check out. And in some areas, it'll be real difficult to get any reliable data because there'll be too few home sales in that price range. So, and again, remember, this is a shifting number. The luxury home market in my area may be a lot higher than your area. The luxury home market in your area might be $500,000. It might be $600,000. In my area, it's 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, that neighborhood. So just keep in mind that those are shifting numbers. Don't take what I say about my market and apply those exact same numbers to yours. You have to figure out those numbers for your market. Next. But I don't want to be homeless. The tight supply of homes in many hot markets is making the stress of buying and selling higher than normal. The limited number of homes in a competitive environment means that many homeowners are afraid to sell for fear of having no home to buy. Many sellers are looking for non-contingent offers, meaning the buyers do not have a home to sell. Even if their home is under contract, they might get passed over for a buyer without a home to sell. This increased pressure makes many potential home sellers decide to stay put. This gap will likely keep inventories low and continue to push prices higher. This absolutely is going on. I talk to folks frequently who are considering selling, and one of the big things they're concerned about is where are they going to go when they sell. Now, the only ones who've had absolutely no trouble, no hesitation, have been the folks I've talked to who are leaving the state. They're leaving this market for a market that tends to be a lot less expensive than where they are. So they feel like that difference between the two marketplaces will really make their move good, and there's no hesitation at all. For the folks who are planning to stay in this area, unless it represents a dramatic change for them, for instance, cutting their commute from an hour to 15 minutes, those kinds of things can often make a huge difference. But that's far rarer than usual. I mean, literally the last time I had someone move for those reasons, and for those of you who've been listening for a super long time, you'll remember the last time I sold a Hollister house. And I'm not talking about the one I sold early this year. I'm talking about the one I sold 2 or 3 years ago. That's really the last time I had someone who was all about that move. And that made total sense. I mean, they were an hour and 30-minute commutes each way. And they moved to within 15 minutes of work. Huge price difference for them. Hollister was exceptionally difficult to get that home sold, but they were buying a home right near where they worked. And I haven't seen folks doing that since then. It's been kind of an interesting dry spell on that being a primary motivator. So I guess that's kind of interesting. I think we'll probably get more specific stuff, but basically it boils down to the same kinds of concerns and hesitations that we were talking about really a year ago. Sellers being hesitant to sell because they don't know what they're going to buy. So, because remember, every seller is also a buyer. So they're concerned about the buying side of the equation. Remodeling or staying, right? Will we see a stagnation in the market next year because of folks who decide to remodel rather than move? I think when you combine those last 2 points, it's almost a self-answering question. There seems to be a pretty good case to be made for the motivation of folks to do that, to remodel instead of buy. And as far as interest rates go, I agree. I don't think we're going to see any big concerns there. And then finally, the first point they made was millennials rising from the basements. And I'm just not sure we're going to see that. Overall, what does that mean? I don't think it means we see a big drop in prices necessarily. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw very flat prices next year. But I would guess that if we do see some sort of a big bulge in demand as caused by millennials, it would be short-lived, as I think their tolerance for dramatically increasing prices would be very short-lived. I think as a group, I just don't think that they're going to be willing to cough up all that extra money to compete in a marketplace where 15 people are making offers in the same home. It may increase our mushroom calculation that we've talked about before, where it may drive them further and further out. But why do that when for less money per month, they can continue to rent an apartment that's very, very close to where the jobs are? It's a hard argument to come up with until we start seeing some actual single-family residential homes being made that satisfy the need, that satisfy the need of the first-time buyer and folks who are just entering into the marketplace. All right, folks, and then I think that's one thing that speaks well to the buy and flip scenario. If you go in there and buy the absolute worst house you can find and make it a good house, I think the potential not only for the market momentum of value to pay off for you, but also just demand to pay off for you, even if things remain flat. I think that you're in a really good position in some of these marketplaces to make that work. All right, folks. I really do appreciate you spending your valuable time with me. I hope that in return, I've given you a little bit of value in terms of things to think about or different pieces of data that will get you thinking in interesting ways relating to your goals. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.